faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand has provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. I want to thank Judy Ebersol for being with me this morning, playing for us this morning, our prelude and our postlude. And I'm Chaplain Robert Carnegie, and I'm glad to be with you this Friday morning. This morning, I've entitled this devotional, Turning a Blind Eye. And I wondered where this phrase came from. Where did the phrase to turn a blind eye come from? Well, there is a popular, somewhat true tale from a story of the Royal Navy. There was a gentleman an admiral named Horatio Nelson. And Nelson was blinded in one eye early in his Royal Navy career. But during the Battle of Copenhagen in 1801, war against France, the cautious Admiral Sir Hyde Parker commanded that the British forces, or he sent a command to the British forces, sending a signal to Nelson to discontinue any action that was happening. Naval orders were given via a system of signals of flags. When this order was brought to the more aggressive Nelson's attention, he said to the captain, "You know, Folly," turning to the captain, "I have only one eye. I have a right to be blind sometimes." And then putting the glass to his blind eye, in that mood of mind which sports with bitterness, he exclaimed, "I really do not see the signal." But as I looked further, this phrase, turning a blind eye, is a shortening of the phrase to turn a deaf ear and the blind eye, or they're a variance. First recorded in a discourse of walking by faith by the philosopher and Church of England clergyman John Norris, when he said, "To be crucified to the world, and to have the world crucified to us, to be dead to its pleasures, and insensible of its charms, to turn the deaf ear and the blind eye to all those pomps and vanities of the world which we renounced at our baptism, and to have it no longer in our hearts, but under our feet." Well, this text this morning comes from Acts 18, 5-7. And you may be wondering, to turn a blind eye, how does that fit in here? Well, let me start reading Acts 18 at verse 5. When Silas and Timothy came to Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. But when they opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, "Your blood be on your heads. I am innocent of it. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." Well, Gallio, who was the proconsul of Achaia, the Jews of Corinth made a united attack on Paul and brought him to the place of judgment. They said, "This man," they charged, "is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the law." Just as Paul was about to speak, Gallio said to them, "If you Jews were making a complaint about some misdemeanor or serious crime, it would be reasonable for me to listen to you. But since it involves questions about words and names of your own law, Settle the matter yourself. I will not be a judge to such things." So he drove them off. Then the crowd there turned on Sosthenes, the synagogue leader, and beat him in front of the proconsul. And Gallio showed no concern whatsoever. So the question is, do we have a right to turn a blind eye? And what happens when we do? Here in Acts 18, Paul is once again in trouble. The Jews in Corinth drag him in front of this man Gallio, who was the governor of the province. They wanted him to punish him. But not seeing any crime, as we read, he chose not to deal with this matter, telling them to deal with it themselves. And so the results are the beating of Sosthenes, who was the official in this synagogue. And while he was being beaten, Gallio pays no attention to what is going on, turning a blind eye to the ensuing violence. Well, perhaps he had felt that he had the right to turn a blind eye to this matter, since it did not directly relate to his role of upholding the Roman law. So even as a man is beaten in front of his court, he pays no attention to it, no concern of his. What had turning a blind eye cost? What had turning a blind eye cost millions of people throughout the years? From genocide to bullying, the absence of attention or action allows injustice to continue when we turn a blind eye. In 2013, while in Poland, UN Human Rights Chief Navi Pillay visited the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum, where she held candles in front of the death wall and signed the commemoration book for victims of the Nazi regime. And her message reads, "All those who deny the Holocaust happened or engage in anti-Semitism or other forms of religious, racial, or ethnic intolerance, xenophobia, or discrimination of any sort should visit Auschwitz so that they realize where such behavior can lead." The warning signs of serious human rights violations were there for all to see in the 1930s, yet everyone turned a blind eye. As a former president of the UN Rwanda Tribunal, where suspects of genocides were tried, she says, "I can testify that we have still not learned the full lesson of the Holocaust. It is truly humbling and harrowing experience to feel the chill of evil and immense tragedy that permeates the walls and grounds of this terrible place." She goes on to say, "On behalf of the whole United Nations system, I sign this book in commemoration of all the children, women, and men who were killed by the Nazi regime in absolute denial of the human rights." With so many ills in our world, you might be thinking, yeah, there's a lot of ills in our world. It would be exhausting and impossible to pay attention to them all. But I do think there are times when we are pointedly invited to pay attention to things, even things that do not directly concern us, to recognize that our experience is not the only experience. Let us not turn a blind eye, but continue to pay attention, to listen, to learn, and to act on behalf of justice and life. As people who are called to share God's love with all creation. The last two songs that Judy will be playing are When the Storms of Life Are Raging, and that is page 558, and then I Am the Bread of Life. The song, When the Storms of Life Are Raging, two of the verses I'll read here. When the storms of life are raging, stand by me, stand by me. When the storms of life are raging, stand by me. When the world is tossing me like a ship upon the sea, thou who are rulest wind and water, stand by me. In the midst of tribulation, stand by me. In the midst of tribulation, stand by me. When the host of hell assail and my strength begins to fail, thou who never lost a battle, stand by me. I want to close with this sending prayer this morning. When we follow Christ, who says, take up our cross, we follow Christ, who bids us come and die. We follow Christ, who summons us to new life. The one who calls is faithful, and until an end will keep us, now and forevermore. Amen.